A full year ago, the European Court made the decision not to extradite criminals to Kazakhstan due to numerous cases of police brutality and prison tortures, as well as other methods of pressure against the accused and convicted. Human rights activists say that nearly 300 citizens' complaints against torture during police investigations were registered last year alone. For comparison, there were only 64 similar complaints in 2005.
The brutal beating of inmates Oleg Yevloev and Dmitry Tyan is only one of the few high-profile cases that have received publicity. Human rights activists believe that their confessions were achieved through tortures. Yevloev's father is of the same opinion.
We know
the names of the tortures, but they have not been punished. Oleg has written a letter about tortures and humiliation to the first deputy prosecutor Akhmetov, who did nothing about the situation.
The impunity of law enforcement officials who torture suspects and prisoners is beyond comprehension. Even if some cases like that end up being investigated, officers usually get away with power abuse charges. Citizens of Kazakhstan have nothing left to do but look for justice abroad. Just recently, the UN Committee Against Torture received a complaint from the Open Society Justice Initiative about the case of Alexander Gerasimov, crippled by law enforcement agents. The problem does exist, but there are no effective mechanisms to investigate the cases of torture in Kazakhstan. 3 years ago, Aron Atabek was sentenced to 18 years in a maximum security colony for organizing unrest in Zalmaris microdistrict Shanrak. This spring, the dissident was transferred to a prison near Arkalyk, known for cruel treatment of prisoners. Aron's wife, Jainagulia Darhan, claims that her husband is subjected to constant tortures. Supposedly, other participants of Shanrak events are treated the same way. This 27-year-old guy convicted for Shanrak case can no longer be considered a living person, as he was tortured to the point when his urogenital system was torn. He will not live for long and is still going only by his spirit. The impunity of law enforcement agencies can also be explained by the inconsistency of the UN Convention Against Torture and the article of the Kazakhstan's criminal code that deals with the liability for torture. According to human rights activists, the main problem is that torture cases are investigated by employees of the same bodies against which complaints are filed in the first place. This leads to cover-ups, although something should and must be done about the situation. Many people might believe this is pointless, but complaints must be written and they should clearly indicate the time and place of beatings as well as persons administered them. Beating can be easily proven later on the basis of the medical checkups. Complaints like this can also be filed by inmates' family members. After all, this can be problematic for prisoners themselves, as guards will do everything to prevent complaints leaving the prison premise. This year, Kazakhstan adopted a number of improved anti-torture regulations, although representatives of the Human Rights Bureau believe these measures are useless and will not actually work. I thought that Kazakh authorities will actively investigate to contribute to the investigations of torture causes and prosecute those involved. This does not happen. In the meantime, the number of victims of the police brutality is growing all the time. On November 5, 2009, prisoner Akılbek Mollasanov was killed in a penal colony E166/10. He was convicted along with 36 other supporters of the banned in Kazakhstan religious party Hizbut Tahrir al-Islami. It seems that he will not be the last victim.
The court of the South Kazakhstan region sentenced Timur Kalmurzaev, Yerzhan Bostanov and Timur Kilibayev to 8 years of prison for gang rape, reversing the initial ruling of the first instance court to acquit the men.
The Appeals Court of South Kazakhstan found Timur Kalmurzaev, Yerzhan Bostanov and Timur Kilibayev guilty of gang raping Dilfuza Auezova and sentenced them to 8 years in the minimum security prison. This verdict is a complete reversal of the ruling made by the first instance court on April 12th, and unsurprisingly, the mothers of the convicted still believe in their son's innocence.
The victim demanded us to settle for $30,000, but we could not come up with the money. So they asked for our house. After realizing that we cannot satisfy their demands, they filed an appeal.
The victim's mother, Khalida Auezova, denies this accusation, saying that even after the announcement of the verdict, she saw no remorse from the criminals, while the mothers of convicted verbally assaulted the young woman. They visited us and brought their apologies, but I felt a threat in their words. They said that even if we do not accept their apologies, they will manage to avoid the responsibility. They also spoke poorly of my daughter. Public defenders claim the process is very complicated as the judge not only considered the appeal but also conducted a new judicial examination. The prosecutor demanded up to 10 years of imprisonment for the convicted, but the judge softened the punishment. The judge was impartial and objective, thus we are glad the justice prevailed. On Wednesday, it was obvious from the look of Dilfuza and her mother that they went through so much misfortune. This was the best indication of the case's seriousness. Dilfuza's mother, Khalida Uezova, says that now the family will have to leave their native Sarayagaj and try to start a new peaceful life somewhere else.
On Thursday, parliamentarian Slyambek Akimov was expelled from Nur Otan for adultery. Representatives of the Pavlodar's branch of the ruling party believe its members should have perfect reputations when it comes to extramarital affairs.
A lawmaker from Pavlodar, Slyambek Akimov, was kicked out of the ruling party Nur Otan for immoral behavior. He became already the fourth party member excluded in the region. In January 2010, a criminal case was instigated in Almaty after a woman filed an action against Akimov. The 23-year-old said the MP beat her in a hotel room, breaking a rib. Slyambek Akimov commented on the incident only 1.5 months later.
The investigation will show whether she was beaten or not. No criminal case was instigated against me so far.
The party officials claim that all this time they have been waiting for a conclusion of the Interior Ministry, which still could not tell whether Akimov is the suspect or a witness in the case. The last drop was an interview the MP gave to one of the state publications, where the father of two publicly confessed of adultery with the victim Kadakina.
Being a family man, the lawmaker has officially confirmed that he was in a relationship with another woman for the past 5 years and gave her various expensive gifts, which is unacceptable for a party member and a parliamentarian.
Slyambek Akimov still holds a parliament seat, although he is no longer a member of Nur Otan. Representatives of the ruling party say they had already submitted a proposal to the lower chamber to introduce relevant amendments to the legislation. Now, though, the MP will lose his chair only if the court will find him guilty of beating the young woman.
The 12-year education will be introduced in Kazakh schools in the near future. On Thursday, the education minister announced a strategic development plan for the next decade. Jhansi Tuminbayev admitted that education in Kazakhstan falls behind not only Europe, but also several neighboring states.
On June 10th, the education minister Jhansi Tuminbayev said that 12-year education will be launched in Kazakhstan by 2015. Supposedly, by that time, teacher salaries will rise by 1.5 times. The minister also promised to solve the problem with the shortage of kindergartens in schools and introduce the e-learning system. According to Tuminbayev, only 28% of Kazakh students have a computer and only 11% of pupils have access to the internet.
The level of education must meet the requirements of the economy, especially now when we're entering the global educational stage and many of our children study abroad. We're trying to cover all fields of education to the best of our abilities.
The minister intends to introduce the per capita financing so that teachers' salaries will depend on the number of their students. Also, there will be the public-private crediting of university education, which means all payments will be made on a parity basis. The introduction of this innovation will cost the state $3.5 billion over the next 5 years. The Prime Minister has decided not to rush with the decision.
Education is a backbone, as every parent wants to provide his children with good education. We need to justify these expectations.
The Prime Minister asked the government to finalize the state program within 2 months, taking into account all criticism and public opinions. It is expected that the updated document will be reviewed and adopted in August.
These were all the latest updates from Kazakhstan. Thank you for watching us. Goodbye.